as we start today, I want to point out that I'm really outnumbered. I'm not quite sure how many, where we all fall, but I know that I am severely outnumbered because I am probably the youngest guy in the building. So go easy on me. I kind of struggled this week. Last week I knew I was going to be given a message today, and just nothing was popping in my head. I didn't have something going, oh, this is what you got to talk about. This is what you got to talk about. And it started to dawn on me that this is probably the last Sunday that I'll be standing up here while Dad is sitting out there. Now, it's not the last Sunday I'll stand up here, I'm sure. We can end it as soon as we want, as possible, but it's probably not the last time I'll stand here and give a message. And it's also not the last day that my dad will be in church. But next week, he's going to be out of town, and the weekend after that, I'm going to be out of town, and then he's probably going to be leaving. Sometime after the week of the 13th, he's going to be heading out, driving east and seeing what kind of trouble he can cause out on that coast. I haven't warned the entire coast yet, but we probably should think about that. So this is sort of my last opportunity to harass my dad with the protection of the pulpit. I don't think anybody would be shocked to hear that my dad and I are sort of, abusive towards each other in a funny way. He gives as good as he gets, and so today I'm going to have a slightly lighter message than maybe normal. Next week, totally, serious and dark, but today a little bit lighter. With Dad packing up and getting ready to go and all the things going on, I've had plenty of opportunity to point out that my dad is a cranky old man. He is cranky, he is old, and he is a man. Cranky old man. Somewhere, though, in the back of his mind, I know that my dad is probably laughing because he knows that it's not going to be very long before I'm the subject of the exact same discussions. He knows I've got kids at home that, there are times when my head's on fire, I'm ready to explode. I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. And, Benjamin's going to be like, oh, slow your roll, cranky old man. And I'm going to be like, do you even speak English? Right? Because Benjamin is not that old guy, and I'm suddenly becoming the old man. So I thought I would talk about cranky old men. Obviously, I got my dad as an example. I even brought some pictures to show. So we're going to show some pictures of cranky old men. So I got my first picture of what could be considered a cranky old man. Moses. I've talked about Moses before. In fact, I've talked about Moses smashing the tablets before. But when you look at this picture and you see Moses and he's there and he's just miffed, he's just angry, right? You could imagine people thinking, that dude is a cranky old man. Why is he so cranky, right? But if you think about it right now, and as I said, I'm the youngest one in the building right now. I think that most of us have experienced that moment when we're frustrated with the younger generation for being unable to follow simple instructions, right? How many of us as parents or aunts and uncles have dealt with younger people who just can't do what they're told, right? Makes you want to smash stuff, doesn't it? Gets you angry, you get frustrated, you get upset, right? Now, in Exodus 32, chapter 19, we read about Moses. Moses had been traveling, right? The Israelites had been out, and they had been wandering around, and it's going to work if I'm in Exodus, not Leviticus. Exodus 32:19 will make so much more sense. Why do I keep winding up in numbers? Man. I was at church one time in Virginia, and a pastor And that was at Alicia's church. Catholic priest was trying to go through the blessing, and you could tell somebody had moved all of his bookmarks. Because this guy, and he was a cranky old man, by the way, this guy was sitting trying to look through his book and find where he was supposed to be, kind of like this. So 32:19, it says, when Moses came close enough to the camp to see the bull calf and to see the people dancing, he became furious. There at the foot of the mountain, he threw down the tablets he was carrying and broke them. Right? Moses had been on top of the mountain communing with God. He had been getting these tablets with the law. Right? He had left. Now, it was probably more than one simple instruction, but he had left basically, hey, I'm going to go up and talk to God. Don't burn the house down while I'm gone. Right? Well, he comes back. What have they done? They're burning the house down, right? They've not only, gone about doing their own things, they've created an idol, and they're frolicking around and cavorting around and worshiping this idol. So you can imagine Moses when he comes down. He just brought these people out of exile for their inability to follow God's commands, and they're doing this. Now, they might have looked at Moses and said, what a cranky old man. But I think that we can look at it and go, maybe he's got a point, right? They're on a 40-year trek through the desert, right? And they went off the rails because Moses was gone for 40 days, right? Now, side note, I wrote this. Side note. If you want an idea of 40 years, those of you who have been around for the church for a while, right? Dad, what year did you graduate or not graduate? What year did you leave the Navy in? 1977. In 1977, Dad retired from the Navy, and we hopped in a car with a camper behind it and started tooling across country to Wisconsin. 1977, Dad arrived home in Wisconsin after his time in the Navy. Do the math, right? 40 years ago, he came back from the Navy here. And that's, when we think about the Israelites in the desert, 40 years. That's the time that Dad left the Navy and is now getting ready to leave and go to Maryland. It's a long time. And they freaked out over 40 days. That's a month, right? So I think a lot of us could easily relate to Moses when he's freaking out and smashing these stones, just angry, right? Oddly enough, though Moses was the one who was really mad, he was the one who had to go and intercede on behalf of the Israelites. Because if you'll recall, when God sees the Israelites and what they're doing, he points it out to Moses, and he's like, I've had it. I'm going to unleash my wrath upon him and just obliterate him. Moses, you'll be the one to renew the nation. We're starting over. And Moses says, no, wait. Hang on. Don't do that. Let's address this. Let's not do that. That's a tough thing to do sometimes, right? I know that a lot of us as parents, when we're dealing with younger people, they do something, it's easy to have a snap decision, right? To respond and to react rather than to weigh it out. I spend a lot of time thinking, about how I responded as a kid when I would do something wrong and my mom or dad would come down on me, and I would, okay, so stop and think, Tom. It works sometimes. Other times it doesn't. Other times I'm just a parent and I respond and I blow up, and then I'll go solve it later, right? I'll figure it out later. It's very hard to look at someone doing something wrong that you're so upset about and stop and say, no, wait. Let's think this through rather than go on emotion, right? Crankiness like this can be justified. Our responses aren't always perfect. His response was not perfect. He threw those stones down. He smashed God's law. He had to go back up and have God give him a new set, right? He didn't respond perfectly, but I think we can understand it. So I got another picture of another cranky old man. That's Saul and David. Yeah, Saul was actually that cranky. You know, that's really cranky, right? Smashing some stones is kind of cranky. Attempting to kill someone, that's more cranky. We read about this in 1 Samuel 18. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to see if we can put ourselves in Saul's frame of mind, okay? And think about it from today's environment, all right? You're on the job, right? For those of us that are still working, we're on the job. They bring some person in and say, this person will work for less than you do. We want you to train that person, and then they're going to take your job and you're going away. How many people would take that and go, oh, yay, I get to train somebody new. I love teaching people, right? That's not the response most of us would have. Most of us would sit there dumbfounded, shocked, and arguably very cranky, right? I know I wouldn't respond well, right? But that was what Saul was doing. Saul was the king, but he knows that David had been appointed to become king. Saul went through different periods of time, and at this particular time, he had learned that David was better. He was more successful in combat. The people liked him better. He was just all around more successful than Saul viewed himself as. So he got a little angry and started throwing spears at David. Cranky old man. And I got one more picture. Another person who might be considered as a cranky old man. That's Noah. And he's standing there. Now, when I look at this, two things come to mind. The first is, again, that sense of frustration that an older person, right? Noah was 500 years old at this point. When God came, he was 500 years old. And he knew that the younger generation, these people who had come after him, were so sinful. They were so, far from God's plan that God said, that's it. I'm starting over, right? Sort of like Moses in the wilderness, right? Only this time it was done. That's it. I'm flooding the earth. I'm obliterating it. So Moses is looking, and you got to think how frustrated he would be with that younger generation. And then in this picture, the other thing I think is, get off my lawn, right? That cranky old man. I don't know, are any of us that cranky old man? It's not me. I don't. But I think a lot of us know that cranky old man. In Genesis 6, we read about another one that I just didn't mark. Fortunately, it's early in the Bible. In Genesis 6, we read a little bit about what Noah was going through, but I thought it was interesting, and I just pointed out. In 5:32, it says, after Noah was 500 years old, he had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So, Moses is not just an old man. He's really old by today's standards. By early biblical standards, maybe not that, but he's old. And so we read in Genesis 6 about what God says to Noah. I'm going to do this. I'm going to destroy the earth. I'm going to wipe out mankind, and you're going to carry on humanity. It's going to be on your shoulders, right? We might joke about cranky old men, and trust me, I do. I know that one day it will come back, to hammer me probably tenfold, but I like to joke about cranky old men. And by the way, women aren't left out of that, May. May knows about me and crotchety women. But much as we joke about it, there's one thing that we know, that the older people in this church are a huge, valuable resource, right? I look out today and I see a lot of people who have a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience. They have a lot of stability. They're people that this church couldn't survive without. Whether we're cranky or not, right? Moses might have thrown down some rocks, but Moses continued to lead the Israelites until they reached the promised land. I've always said, my dad, like Moses, made some mistakes along the way. Yep. He makes that threat about rewriting the will pretty regular. But oddly enough, I think I'm a better person for those mistakes. I don't think my dad would stand up and tell you that he was a perfect father. Just like I'm not going to try and suggest I'm a perfect father. But what I do like to think, and we talk about at the brigade, growing an inch, I like to think that some of the mistakes that I think my dad made, I try to improve. And I can ask no more than that from Benjamin and Nicholas and Miranda, because I know I make mistakes too. There are times I walk away and I go, wow, I handled that about wrong. I know I make mistakes. And all I can hope is that in time, they take the mistakes that I made and figure out how to make them better. Because mistakes make us better when we learn from them and grow. Likewise, Saul, he might have been afraid of the success of David. Now, we know that a lot of older generations, we live vicariously through the younger generations. There are a lot of us like to watch our kids succeed at something. We like to watch them do better than we did. We like to see their success and think that we had something to do with it. Other times, we shake our heads at the younger generations, just like Moses and Noah did. We question what they're doing. But at the end of the day, Saul knew something. He knew that David had been called, consecrated, and blessed by God. While we might joke with those who, like my dad, get older and crankier with each passing day, they're the ones who have been here readying the younger generation. They're the ones who are teaching not only people like myself, but grandkids, great-grandkids, however far down the line we can go, right? I saw a picture the other day, a teacher friend of mine posted. It was a kindergarten class that they had paired with a nursing home, right? The nursing home residents were actually in the class with the kids. And it was awesome, right? You think about it, right? Here are these people who are amongst the most experienced, the most seasoned citizens we have, and they're there to help share what they can with those younger kids. And like Saul, while it might have seemed at times that my dad wanted to kill us, he usually pointed us in the right direction. Sometimes he was cranky about it, but he would usually point us in the right direction. Noah may have been frustrated with the sin of those around him, but he continued to focus his attention on God. He didn't focus on how he might, how Noah might correct the actions of those younger generations. He focused on what God had told him to do. He focused on the mission that God laid before him. Likewise, we have some cranky old people in the church who might like to point out where we're struggling. In this case, I'm sad that Bob's not here because I didn't look at my dad. I thought about Bob, right? Bob is one of those people that we might look at and think, Bob, you're cranky today. But usually Bob, when he's cranky and telling you something, he's not wrong. You might think that he could say it nicer, but he's usually right. He got upset with me the other day about the way the service went. He was like, there were no positive songs, and I didn't look at him and go, well, what are you talking about, Bob? I asked him what he had to say. I asked him what he thought. because he's been around a while and he knows what he might like, and he's got a fire. He's not focused on, me or the building or the parking lot. He's focused on what God is calling him to do, even at this day and age. Bob might come across like a guy telling you to get off his grass. Get off my lawn, kids. But he's got valid points. Cranky old men are a fact of life. They've been around. I think we look, right? We got some cranky old men in the Bible. We got some cranky old men today. And arguably, after Dad leaves, while he might be one fewer cranky old men in the congregation, there's cranky old men growing up after him. We all have our periods where someone's going to say that we're cranky. As I said, we looked at the tools here, right? And it was like you were like playing right into my hands with the answers, because she liked the shiny tools. Didn't matter that they're old. She didn't look and say, oh, well, that one's newer. That's obviously the one I like. She looked and said, I like this one. Sometimes older, maybe a little finicky, not as flashy. Sometimes cranky and old is what we need. So don't beat me when I leave the pulpit today. Hopefully Dad won't write me out of the will. The idea of cranky old men, much as it is a joke, is very important. And I want us always to keep in mind that it is those elders, it is those cranky old people who actually lead this church and brought it from where it was to where it is, and will continue to do so in the future. Please join me in prayer as we close today's message. Heavenly Father, today we took a lighthearted look at cranky old men. As I said in the children's message, you've been around a long time too. Jesus came and died more than 2,000 years ago. There are people that would look at that message and say, it's old, it's outdated, it doesn't apply anymore. We know that's not true. We know that just because something is old doesn't make it invaluable. In fact, age often makes things much better. These cranky old men and cranky old women who are in the church today are the ones who built it. They're the ones who have led it for many, many years. We ask that you would bless each of them and give those who come after them the ears to hear and the wisdom to apply what they learn. We thank you for those people who have led the church and have earned the title Cranky Old Men. In your name we pray, amen.